this topic. I will try to make it as interactive as I can. It's not based too much on research, to be honest. So it's just some of my thoughts based on my experiences and my constant communication with teachers. And of course, this idea of digital minimalism, which I find really powerful, especially now in 2025. So I'm going to talk about four main points or four sections. First of all, I'm going to discuss something called the ice cream paradox, which you may be familiar with, but it's kind of my hook for this. Maybe you're not aware of what that is. Then a little bit about teacher tech overwhelm. Then I'll go into digital minimalism and some frameworks, models, ideas, thoughts, questions for how best to select tech tools. So let's begin. I want you to imagine you are walking through the city or through a city center somewhere. It's a sunny day. You're really enjoying yourself. You don't have to go to work. And you see someone eating an ice cream. And of course, when you see someone eating an ice cream, your next thought is, I want an ice cream. So you decide to look for an ice cream shop. So you walk down the street and you see two of them. On your left is ice cream parlor A, and you look through the window and you see there are three flavors, just three: vanilla, strawberry, and chocolate. And then on the other side of the road, you see this ice cream shop that's just full hundreds of different flavors. So you have to make a choice. Which one do you buy from? So in the chat box, I want you to think, which one would you buy from and why? And which one is most likely to satisfy your need for an ice cream? So I'll give you 30 seconds to think about that. Choose one of the ice cream shops and tell me why you would choose that one. Okay, I see lots of Bs, a few As. Okay, great. So I guess most people would choose B, has lots of different flavors. The other week, I went out to one of these ice cream shops with my extended family, and I went into one like B, and I spent 20 minutes deciding what to choose. And then at the end, I started eating my ice cream, and I thought, oh, I didn't want that one. No, no, why did I choose that one? I always choose the wrong one. And then I saw my nephew had an ice cream and I wanted to taste his. He wasn't happy with his either. And basically, this is an example of what they call the paradox of choice, which is that more doesn't necessarily mean you'll be happier. And this was all researched by a behavioral psychologist called Barry Schwartz. And he said, learning to choose is hard, learning to choose well is harder, and learning to choose well in a world of unlimited possibilities is harder still, perhaps too hard. So they sometimes call it the paradox of choice. When you have lots of options, why doesn't that make us happy? Or the tyranny of choice, which is that we get very, very stressed, pressured, we procrastinate a lot, and we often get very confused when there are lots and lots of choices. And I think this really relates to us as teachers, especially teachers working online in the 21st century. And I'm what they call a digital immigrant. And by that, I'm old enough to remember a time, roughly the first kind of 10, 12 years of my life, when computers weren't really a thing. Okay, I know they existed, but I wasn't really in daily contact with them. And so for me as a digital immigrant, I came into this new world and I've had to learn how to deal with it. In the last 10, 12 years, I've been working exclusively online, but it's just amazing how many tech tools there are available now. And there was a report by UNESCO just last year, and there were some findings which are really interesting. Now, UNESCO looked at language teachers and teachers of other subjects around the world. And it concluded there's little robust evidence on digital technology's added value in education. Now, I use LinkedIn a lot, and people are often talking about that. Does this tool actually improve learning outcomes? Possibly, maybe not. There are obviously lots of benefits, but obviously lots of drawbacks as well. And the other key finding, or another key finding, was that a lot of evidence about the effectiveness of digital tools comes from people trying to sell it. Okay, so a lot of these studies are financed by these companies. Now, I don't want to get too much into that, but it's definitely a topic that you really need to consider. I think it's really important for us to retain a healthy skepticism about tools. And these tools are appearing all of the time, and they're changing, they're adapting. And what does that result in? Well, lots of us as teachers, we feel unprepared. We lack confidence teaching with technology because the institution we work for says, okay, last week we were using Zoom, now we want to use a new platform. Or we were using Padlet, now we're going to use something else. And we very quickly have to get to grips with this new tool. And some of us aren't given enough training. A lot of us have to do it in our own time, and we're constantly playing catch up. And so my experience is, one, there are too many tools. There's not enough time to learn them. Difficult to find enough training to really learn to use them well. And we're always thinking about how effective they are. Okay. And maybe we don't have time really to think about their effectiveness. And you can almost term it as a ROI issue. So ROI, return on investment. As teachers, is it worth us trying to learn all these new tools if it's going to be replaced by another one somewhere down the line, or that it's going to be adapted or updated so frequently that we're always having to learn new things? And that causes us a lot of emotional stress. It puts a lot of demands on our time, and we can get really, really, well, it can take some of the joy out of what we do and the time we spend with our teachers. So, one proposed approach to deal with this issue is digital minimalism. Some of you may have heard of this. Some of you may be familiar with minimalism, but not so familiar with digital minimalism. But the star in this world is this chap called Cal Newport, who's written a number of books about this. Another book I recommend is called Deep Work, which is all about focus. And this is his definition of digital minimalism. So I'll give you 20 or 30 seconds to read it. Okay, so it's a philosophy that helps you question what digital communication tools and behavior surrounding these tools add the most value to your life. It's motivated by the belief that intentionality and aggressively clearing away low value digital noise and optimizing your use of the tools that really matter can significantly improve your life. Now, I think we could change the word life here to teaching, and it would still make sense. So the most value to your teaching, significantly improve your teaching. So that's where I'm going now with this presentation. Going to talk a little bit more about digital minimalism. Now, it's interesting that Cal Newport wrote about this on his blog for a few years before he published his book. Now, the book's good, but like a lot of business books, it's 300 pages and you get the main idea maybe in 2 pages, but it's still a good book. And I came across an old blog of his written in 2016 where he presented his initial principles of digital minimalism. So here we are, there were 9 of them. So missing out is not negative. This is a good one because people talk about FOMI, fear of missing out, and people recently have talked about JOMI, the joy of missing out. So it's like when you don't have to worry about something that everyone's talking about him, it can free up your mind and free up your cognitive ability as well and produce a sense of well-being. Less can be more. Start with the first principles. We need to really focus on our beliefs as teachers and about learning and what constitutes effective teaching and effective learning. And that should govern our use of tech tools. The best is different than the rest. Okay, so if you can find a tool that does lots of different things really well, maybe that's the one you've got to use. Digital clutter, any type of clutter is stressful for most of us, or many of us. Attention is scarce and fragile. Many of the best uses of the online world support better living online. We don't only exist in the online world. Be wary of tools that solve a problem that didn't exist before the tool was invented. Marketing is extremely good at selling us things we didn't think we needed, but it convinces us that we do need them. And activity trumps passivity. Okay, so maybe in the chat, if you'd like to just tell me if you agree or disagree with most of those principles, tell me which ones resonate most with you, and maybe you disagree with some of them. Okay, so lots of people, hell yes. Number two, less can be more. Maybe you disagree with some of them. Five, digital clutter is stressful. Yeah. You're not sure. Right. Yeah. This idea of what we do online complementing what we do offline is the AI tools. Yeah, there are so many now, and it's like, which one is the best? Maybe I don't need any of them. Okay, great. Another thing I'd like to mention at this point, and I think it's mainly related to number two, but are you familiar with the Pareto principle? Pareto, which states that 80% of our results come from 20% of our activity. So the idea that actually some things are really, really useful and they produce these fantastic outcomes. And a lot of the things we do, well, maybe we don't really need to do them. Okay. And that's really interesting as well. Great. So Newport, in his book, condensed these nine principles to three key ones. Clutter is costly. Optimization is important. And remember, I said about training, often we start using a tool, but actually we're not able to optimize our use of it. We just become kind of okay at using it. And maybe we need to get much better at using it before we integrate it in our teaching. And intentionality is satisfying. So this again brings me back to well-being as teachers. We want to feel good about what we do. And if we choose the right tool that aligns with our beliefs and our needs and our objectives, that I think helps us feel a lot better about our own teaching. So I think the idea of digital minimalism is a very valuable one. But how do we select our digital tools? Okay, this is one of the huge challenges we have. So remember at the beginning, I talked about the ice cream parlor with vanilla, strawberry, and chocolate. I did a bit of research about the most popular flavors around the world. I couldn't find that much online, but certainly in the UK and the US, they seem to be the most popular flavors. So most people like one of those three, and they're still the best selling ice cream flavors in those countries. So in the chat box, I would like you to think about your three favorite digital tools. And if you want to, maybe add a sentence explaining why you like it. Okay, TurboScribe, ChatGPT, Canva, ChatGPT. Magic School, I saw a video on that. I'm not that familiar with it, but Kahoot. Okay, great. Okay, so this is really interesting. So many people are talking about AI tools, which is great, but there are a few old favorites in there, like WordWall. Sarah said WordWall, which is something I still love using when I do teacher training. My trainee teachers, they generally love using WordWall because it removes a lot of the complexity. Okay. Quizlet, again, Google Docs. I'm so pleased someone mentioned that. Okay. Now, I think before answering that question or choosing to use a digital tool, it's really important to go back to basics. And back in the 1980s and 1990s, Neil Postman, who was an American researcher, he wrote a lot of fascinating books, and you can watch his videos on YouTube. He's a fantastic public speaker as well, about technology and its impact on education and its impact on culture. Okay. But you read his work, and even though it's written 30, 40 years ago, it really speaks to the 21st century as well. And he said, we've always got to pose this question: what is the problem to which this technology is the solution? Oh, excuse me. And this is such a key question, I think, for all of us. Because often we are seduced by these digital tools, what they call the shiny new object syndrome. We see something, it looks really nice, and we think, I've got to start using that. And yet, maybe it doesn't solve a problem, doesn't really provide a solution, in which case, why are we using it? So I recommend everyone should begin with that question. It's a real key, fundamental question for anything we do in the classroom with tech. So I'm going to talk about a couple of my problems and the tech tools I found to resolve those problems. So I've been teaching now online for about 12 years, I think. And when I taught exclusively in a face-to-face classroom, I love doing dictogloss activities. So if you're not aware of dictogloss, where the teacher or one of the students reads something out, the learners basically listen and they write down the keywords they hear. Then you read it again and they add more words. Then you read it a third time. And by this point, they're generally able to maybe not construct the whole text perfectly, but they're able to use what they heard in terms of the keyword with what they heard later and their own knowledge of syntax and grammar and collocations to create the text. And it's a really, really interesting activity, helps with all four skills. Sadly forgotten. Yeah, I think it's such an impressive and important activity. And when I do it in the online class, and again, it works really well. And the students generally give me really good feedback and say, I'd never thought of doing something like this. But I couldn't work out how to do it online. And then I realized that you can just do it with a Google Doc. And even the collaborative part, this is really important with dictogloss, is the learners, after they've written down what they heard, they pair up or in a small group, but generally they pair up and they compare with their partner. And so there's some peer teaching going on there. So you can do that with Google Docs. You just give each pair a Google Doc and then they can collaborate together. They can write separately on the Google Doc, look at each other, and then create together. So that was an example of how you can use tech to resolve a problem. Another problem I had as a teacher was that I just felt I was getting overwhelmed and just getting really fed up of spending so much time in front of a screen. And I thought, I've got to get out more, but I've also got work to do. And then I came across this app called Audio Pen, and it's very simple. And honestly, now a lot of AI tools can do the same. But this one worked really well for me. And all it does, it's a dictation app. So you just speak into the app. But what it does, it basically summarizes what you've said. It can actually transform it into just bullet points. It can transform it into kind of an essay structure. And it cleans up all the ums, the ers, and everything like that. So it's a really simple app, and it's transformed how I work now because I can just go out for 10 minutes, go for a walk, and actually just speak into the Audio Pen app. I can plan my lessons. I can write reports. I can give feedback. I can just share my ideas. And more importantly, it gets me away from the screen. It gets me doing exercise. And you can also keep the original. So then you could compare, if you're learning a second language, for example, what you've produced and what the app actually does for you. So obviously there are lots of other options here, but this one worked well for me. Now, we need to be principled about how we use technology. And I looked around at some models, and I did a course, a micro credential on teaching online a few years ago, and this was recommended. And it's the SAMR model. And it really helps us classify and categorize and decide how we want to use our tech. So we have a tech tool, and we've got to decide, does it enhance? Does it transform? So there are two main levels there. The transformation is maybe the more advanced levels here. So we look at substitution. Technology acts as a direct substitute with no functional change. So something like a Google Doc is basically almost does the same in many ways as just using a pen and paper. Okay. Now, there are other things we can do with it. Now, we can augment it. For example, there's a functional improvement. You can do things like you can spell check, you can correct the grammar, everything like that. So this would be an example of an augmentation. We're using the tech to improve something, okay? Which again, there is an analog version. But really all they're doing then, the tech is enhancing. But then we move to transformation, and we've got M, modification. So the tech allows us to significantly change the task. Okay, so I'm going to come with some examples in a moment. And then we've got the higher level, or the highest level, redefinition. The technology allows for the creation of new tasks previously inconceivable. So for example, I'm here giving a presentation to 200 people from around the world. Okay, this would not have been possible without the tech. Okay, so I decided to go to ChatGPT, and I used a few prompts, and I thought, okay, what does ChatGPT have to say about the SAMR model in language teaching? So here it came up with substitution. And I also asked it to come up with a question. So am I simply replacing a traditional tool with a digital tool without changing the fundamentals of the learning experience? So Google Docs, PDF worksheets, and ebooks. Basically, this is a basic replacement without change. So if you want to, you can, in the chat box, think of some other tools which you think just substitute. This isn't a negative, by the way. It's fantastic that we can use a tool in the online classroom that we would use in a face-to-face classroom. Now, also augmentation. So we can enhance the tool with some added features. Does the tech provide useful enhancements like built-in feedback, multimedia elements, or interactivity that improve the learning process? came up with Quizlet, Google Docs with comments and voice typing, Grammarly, Kahoot, quizzes. Okay. Using your mobile phone to record yourself speaking. Exactly. Yeah. Sorry, I moved ahead a little bit there. Then the next level, modification. So this significantly changes the way the students engage with the task. Flipgrid, Padlet, Google Docs, Jamboard. I thought this was interesting because Jamboard hasn't been active for the last year, I think. They discontinued it. And I love Jamboard because I used to love in the face-to-face classroom using post-its, getting students to move ideas around for brainstorming, mixing and matching, and gallery walks. Post-its were fantastic for that. And I could do all that online with a Jamboard. Ah, now, I know there are alternatives, but I love the simplicity of Jamboard and Flip as well. Yeah, yeah. So again, this is something that we've got to be aware of. If we really end up depending on a particular tech tool, well, it might disappear. So if we can find ones which we know how to use, which are likely to be here for a long time, then that's all the better for us. And then finally, redefinition. This is where real innovation takes place. Does this tech enable students to do something entirely new, like global collaboration, multimedia storytelling, real-world communication? That would be impossible without it. So again, of course, chatbot. Yeah, Chris Fry, Padlock would like to replace Flip and Jamboard. Yes, it's definitely um, upgraded what it can do. It's definitely trying to fill that gap. Okay. Again, with the podcasting tool, I think Anchor has disappeared. Audacity's still here. Vocaru's still here. So the SAMR model is definitely worth thinking about. And we also need to be a bit careful here as well, because at the higher levels, of course, AI comes in. And just last week, I read a great article about it's called The Death of I Don't Know, which was that basically now we take shortcuts. So if we want to find something out, we can use ChatGPT. It gives us the answer, but we miss the process of thinking about something. This cognitive process, we go straight to the product. And this article basically came up with 4 questions that we need to ask. Well, 3 questions, and then one warning. We risk outsourcing the cognitive process itself, not just the retrieval of knowledge. Okay. So I think that's a warning about overusing Chat GPT or any kind of AI tools, which again comes back to digital minimalism and starting with our first principles. What do we really want to do? Because a lot of these tools are extremely good at creating product, but maybe they skip the process that we all know is so vital for learning. They go straight to performance and they miss out the learning part, in other words. And again, I mentioned it earlier. We also need to remember the Pareto principle. 80% of outcomes come from 20% of causes. So that's the SAMR model, which is definitely worth thinking about. And what I like about this model is that a few people have also aligned it and integrate it with Bloom's taxonomy. So again, you can look at this online, but if you just Google Bloom and SAMR, plenty of information will come up. But as we can see, there's some connection there between the two frameworks. But again, I want to reiterate that if your tool is doing the creating, the evaluating, and the analyzing, well, what's the learner doing then? We've got to be really careful about that. We've got to find some way to make sure the tool doesn't do all the heavy lifting. So again, it comes back to that problem, that question. What is the problem to which this technology is the solution? I keep on coming back to that because I think it's so fundamental. So, having thought about all of these questions and digital minimalism and looking at the SAMR model, and I came up with my own checklist. So, this is what I like to use just before I decide to use a tool. And I just very quickly, using this audio pen app, I just speak my answers into the app and just let myself just think about them and talk about them very freely, very creatively for a few minutes. So I'd like you now, if you can, maybe to add a few extra questions. So what would be on your checklist? If you were asked to create a checklist for the teachers at your organization to get them thinking about principled use of digital tools, what questions would you have on your list? So please add them in the chat. They might be similar to mine or there might be others. Right. Yeah. How user-friendly is it? And also, if you're working with teachers, how user-friendly is it for the teachers? Yeah. Any other questions? Is there anything missing, I think, from my list? Exactly. Optimizing my time. So, yeah, I guess thank you, Ron. I guess that's a bit related to number 6, but absolutely, I think, does it make it easier and does it save me time? Right. Will it help create a healthy atmosphere? Yeah, absolutely. I haven't got anything about that. But yeah, the socio emotional environment in which we teach. Are there free alternatives? Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. How much of the syllabus does it help me to cover? Right. Right. I mean, that's one of the big advantages of using course books, isn't it, really? It's that actually they've got most of the syllabus for you. Um, but of course, that can be a huge disadvantage as a dogma advocate. I have my issues with course books. Inclusion, absolutely. Excellent question. Yeah. So again, that relates, I guess, to with 3, can they use it effectively? Does it actually work well with different types of learners? Age group, yeah. Yep. Learners with different abilities, right. Data collection, yeah, absolutely. Great, fantastic questions there. Thank you for those. So I'll probably go back and modify my list. You've definitely given me a few things to think about. So back to A and B, back to my ice cream paradox. So after this presentation, now you've heard what I've had to say about digital minimalism. So again, in the chat box, I don't want you to necessarily answer the question about ice creams, but in terms of digital tools, if you had to choose between having 3 tools that you'd researched, that you'd used, that you decided are really effective, or access to many, many tools, would you decide to go for option A, having 3 tools that you can really optimize, or B, having lots of tools that maybe you'll have to learn how to use, that maybe they won't be effective in terms of your outcomes as you'd have expected, with the extra stress and the extra time and the extra effort needed to master them, would you still give me the same answer? Okay, so we're getting a few more A's now. Okay, some people are still with B's. Oh, Julia, okay, as we say in English, you want your cake and eat it. Yeah, definitely B because I dislike the three popular flavors. Absolutely. Yeah. Great. So I'd just like to remind you of Newport's three principles. Clutter is costly, optimization is important, intentionality is satisfying. Maybe you could print them out and put them on your wall or on post-its next to your laptop. And just to finish, a little thought experiment here. So I want you to imagine you are opening your ice cream language school. So you're going to be working with a number of teachers, okay? And you're going to be restricted only to three digital tools for your teachers and for your learners. Think about your context, think about your learning objective, think about your beliefs, think about what your learners can use and how easy it is to learn them. These tools, think about your teachers and how user friendly they are for teachers. Do they save time? So now in the chat box, I would like you to choose three digital tools. I'm going to make it a bit more complicated. No AI. Okay. Okay. Live worksheets, word wall, and reading apps. Okay. Zoom, Google Drive, and Voice. Okay. So if you can, I'd like you not to choose something that's basically AI. Makes it a bit more challenging. Padlet Nearpod word wall. Yeah. Kahoot. Okay, great. So I think it's worth thinking about. I mean, obviously now AI tools seem to do so many things nowadays, but maybe you could just choose one, stick with it, get to learn it really well, optimize your use of it, and just create shortcuts for yourself so it makes your teaching and you can focus on what you think pedagogically is really necessary for your learners. Okay, so I believe I've come to the end there. So I hope that was useful and it provided you some food for thought. My name's Dylan Gates. I do have a website, but honestly, I'm very lazy, so I haven't put much on it recently. I'm very active on LinkedIn. So if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, please do. Um, I'm always happy to connect. I also have a LinkedIn group. And again, I've been a bit lazy in the last few months, but it's for business English teachers. And it's a place where we can share ideas, activities, get support, get help, and just form a community.